Okay, in our previous lecture, we discussed about little bit introduction to software lifecycle models. So any development process, any development of software should adhere to some process models. If we adhere to any process models, then the project manager or any of the technical team can able to fairly say in which stage particularly currently we are at. Okay, but if you do not adhere to these life cycle models, then there may be certain problems like 99% complete syndrome. Okay, so now we will see in this lecture about various process models. Okay, so before that process models, we will see what are different main activities. Okay, so that are there in any software lifecycle model. Sometimes I say software lifecycle model, sometimes I say software process. Both are the same. Okay. So now let us review the main important steps or activities part of any lifecycle model. So the first one is a problem definition, where we try to define the problem first, and then we need to go through a problem feasibility study through which we try to establish the cost effectiveness of the solution. I mean, whatever the solution we are proposing, whether that is cost effective or not. And then we try to clearly define what are the responsibilities or the functions that a software must undertake. That means what are the functionalities or the requirements. Okay, a user particularly expect from the system or the software system we are going to develop. So that is what is analyzed during this analysis phase. And then system design, so where we try to we talk about the design part. I mean, how the solution can be implemented. And then detailed design, where we'll try to see some sort of detailed discussions on the design part. Okay, and then we have an implementation or coding phase, and then maintenance phase. Okay, so at the end we do have a maintenance phase. So these are the various important activities, and we will talk about each of them one by one. And after that we will talk about some process model. Maybe if possible today we'll start with a process model, or maybe in the next lecture I'll start with the classical waterfall model. Okay, so now there is a separate planning step. Let's say if you are going to develop any large project, so sometimes you can introduce a separate planning step also, apart from the steps that we discussed in the previous slide. Okay, and this can be either it can be a separate step, maybe after the feasibility study phase, or you can keep that planning step part of any feasibility study. Okay, phase. And then study the output of the steps, and at the end we try to see what is the output that comes from each and every phase. Okay, so the first phase we are talking about the problem definition. So what is the problem first? So here during this problem definition phase we try to answer to the question, that is what is the problem first. Okay, and where and by whom this problem is felt. Okay, I mean, who is experiencing this problem. Okay, I mean, and where this problem is actually occurring. Okay, whether let's say within a particular organization where that problem has, and because of that problem we are trying to develop a solution, and the solution may be a software solution, right? So meet users and management and obtain their agreement that there is a problem. So ultimately, so before you ensure that that's a problem, so it is need to be agreed by the user as well as management. That means the user who is going to use the software system that you are developing. Okay, and as well as the management also, because management is the one who is investing money for this particular project. Okay, so they need to agree also. If they are not agreeing onto this problem, then it is not a problem at all. Okay, so that is what, or that's not a project at all. So you need to get the concurrence from user as well as management. If problem exists and it need to be resolved, okay, so that means if there is a problem, then only you need to resolve it. Okay, so then it becomes a project. If there is no problem, then there is that means that is not a project at all. Okay, and commitment of funds also implied. I mean, the management should agree to invest money on this particular project. Okay, otherwise it's not a project at all. Okay, so clearly the main objective of this problem definition is to clearly define goal for the project as well as establish as a project. So I mean, so what is the goal of that particular project, as well as establish that it is a project. That means it's a problem. Okay, so that is the main objective of any problem definition phase. Okay, where we try to define the goal of the project. Now, prepares a brief statement or of problem. So usually part of, I mean, what it prepare, I mean, what it is there in the problem definition. So definition exactly, it contains a brief statement of problem. Okay, so it's a very small document. It's not extensive, but it is very important also. And it is the first deliverable. That means it is a first output from any waterfall model. Okay, because it is the starting phase. So the first deliverable here is the problem definition document. Okay, so it should avoid misunderstanding. So when you are talking very briefly about the problem, so there should not have any misunderstandings also. And you need to get concurrence from user and management. Once that statement of problem is defined, okay, prepared, now that should be agreed by the user as well as management. So that is what I told you in the previous slide. Okay, so they need to we need to get through the user and management as well. So it's a very 1 or 2 pages. So usually the problem statement will be defined in 1 or 2 pages. Okay, so they estimate cost and schedule for the next feasibility step. And part of this problem definition also, we go through some sort of a approximate estimation of cost and schedule. That means what would be the cost required, and how many what is the time really required to for this feasibility step. Okay, and this estimate roughly overall project cost. So here we try to go through some sort of a rough overall project cost estimations, and this cost may be refined at later point of time. So that means it is not the final cost. Okay, whatever the cost estimation we do here, so it's not a final cost estimation. Okay, and there is a misconception by the user that the project will be done with the cost in his mind. That means so user always think that whatever the cost that is in his mind, so that will not be the final one. Okay, so this is a very roughly estimated cost, and but it should be acceptable by the user. Then only we will be able to move ahead to the next level. Okay, and it is preliminary and based on the experience of analyst or computer expert. Okay, so this sort of cost estimation is actually done based on the experience of the analyst or the computer experts. So this step is very short. That means this activity is very short, and it lasts 1 or 2 days. Okay, 1 or 2 days. Usually it doesn't involve any large amount of cost or the investment. It doesn't require any large investment at this point of time. We just usually what we try to do here in this phase. So we just invite an expert from the development industry. I mean, who is going to develop your software? We call an expert from that industry. And then we make him understand what is the problem. I mean, they are experiencing within the organization, and try to find a scope scope. So proper understanding and characterization of problem is essential. So you need to properly understand the problem first, and then so you need to try to see some of these characteristics of this problem. Okay, if that sort of characteristics are there, then only you can say that that's a sort of problem. Okay, we'll see about that characteristics. So as of now, to discover cause of the problem, so you need to first understand or find uh, what is the cause of that particular problem, and you need to go through a proper directed investigation. Also, you need to plan a directed investigation. So you need to go through an investigation, okay, so that you should be able to see what is the problem actually, okay, whether that is a problem or not. So if you are not going through these sort of things, so then what will happen? So success is unlikely. That means you end up solving a wrong problem, and user may not accept sometimes. Okay, so that is the reason why. So first you need to understand and characterize the problem. Okay, so that is what very important. Otherwise, we are actually solving a wrong problem, and after solving that wrong problem, when we deliver that solution to the client or the user or the management, so where user will not accept that solution, as a result the software will be failed. Okay, so there are possible initial characterization of problems. So usually these are the characteristics of any sort of problem. So we try to characterize the problem is as follows. So existing system has poor response time. Okay, whatever the existing system that today you have, okay, so maybe it's a manual system that you have, so that has a poor response time. Okay, so I mean you will not be able to, users are unable to get proper response, quick response from the system, and the system is very pure. Okay, and the user is unable to process a transaction or take too large time. That means, one example you can see, so if there is a banking process, a banking software, so where so it takes too large time to respond. Let's say you can think of any ATM machine here, example of any ATM machine. So let's say after you inserting your debit card into the ATM machine, okay, and you have provided the appropriate PIN code. Now, whatever the transaction you are trying to do access, and if it is taking too long time, what will happen? You usually get frustrated with that particular response, and thereafter you commonly try to do, you try to cancel that particular transaction or something like that, because so that sort of, I mean, if the system is responding to you very not properly, so then also it's a problem. So you first try to see with the existing system. Okay, yeah, there is a Ishwar Chandra. Kindly mute yourself, because it is creating disturbance for me. Can you mute, Ishwar Chandra? Mute yourself. Okay, I have muted you. So, and the unable, if that particular existing system unable to handle workload, okay, so whatever the current system, so if it is not able to handle so many transactions, or the users making transactions at the same time, and there is a long queue of users waiting to get the transactions responded. So if that is happening in that case, so we need some sort of, I mean, you can say that that's a kind of problem. Okay, and existing system is uneconomical. Now whatever the system that you have, if that is not economical, okay, so that means it is uneconomical. Okay, I mean, it is not cost effective. So that is the reason why you need to switch into another kind of system where so you make your system economical. Okay. So problem of accuracy and reliability. So if the existing system do not have better accuracy and reliability, so then also you need to go through. Requisite information is not produced by the system. I mean, whatever the information we expect that the system should provide us, but it is not being produced by the system. So then also we need some sort of system. Okay, let's say you can think of after you registering your courses. Okay, after you registering your courses, if you going through a manual academic procedure of our institute, so maybe you will not be able to see whether the courses that you registered have been accepted by the faculty advisor and the academic office. So that may not be able to give you. But in case of when you, if you are going through your ERP system, once you have registered the course and if I approved all the courses, then you will be able to see the information that your courses has been approved. Okay, so that means the system generates here the information. Maybe in part of your manual system it might not happen. Okay, so that is this way you need to characterize the problem. Okay, if that is happening, then only you can say that it's a kind of problem. And also problem of security also. Okay, so you try to see, okay, so whether security if at all it exists. Okay, so so all of these sort of things should be mentioned. Okay, so railway reservation system, so there, because it all involves financial transactions, so usually you need to provide better security, otherwise so this is one sort of problem part of. Okay, now so usually, so part of any problem definition document, so it is what the structure of a problem definition document looks like. Short document called problem statement document. So usually the sections that will be there, part of this problem definition document, this is what the output that is generated from. So it is a project title. I mean, there is a section project title and then problem statement. The problem statement is very concise. I mean, it is a very short one, and it should not leave any ambiguity or inconsistency or incompleteness in the statement. So this should be a very concise one. So I mean, 1 or 2 pages. Okay, project objectives. So you should define here objectives of the project, and then if at all any preliminary ideas, okay, so you have, so that will be discussed with user as well as management, so as to agree upon that particular solution. Okay, if you have at all any possible solution available that is based upon the past experience, so in discussion with the user or the management, you need to find you need to discuss, or you need to state here in this particular section. Okay, and there is a project scope. So here usually we give the project scope in terms of overall cost estimations. Okay, so if we are trying to give a very rough figure, I mean, what would be the cost? Okay, that means through which you will be able to get a project scope also. That means something what is considered, what is not considered. Okay, so and then there is a feasibility study. So where it should discuss, these steps should discuss what would be the time and cost that will be required for the next step. Okay, so that is what exactly discussed here in this part of this section. So usually, so we always confuse between the problem and solutions. Let's say you take an example here, develop computerized payroll. So it cannot be a problem. developing a computerized problem payroll, it cannot be a problem. Actually, in fact, it is a some sort of solution. Okay, so you can see no commitment is applied to preliminary ideas, may explore many ideas during analysis. So that is what we need to see. So whatever the commitment that we have given during this preliminary, stage, at this preliminary stage, whatever the ideas that we are leaving here, so they may not be the final ones. These things may be changed at later point of time. So now the next phase part of any process model is a feasibility study. So first we have seen the problem definition. The second one is feasibility study. What we try to do here to get better understanding of the problems and reasons by just studying the existing system, if at all. So that means you need to get a proper understanding of the problems. So first you need to study an existing system, if at all available. Okay, then we put ourselves some questions whether we have some feasible solutions to the problems, whether the problem what we are going to solve is a worthy one, okay, or not. Uh, so you need to consider whether we need to consider the different alternatives. Okay, so what are the different alternatives to the current existing system? So and then what you need to try to estimate the cost and benefits for each and every alternative. So you have, let's say there are 4 alternatives for the current existing system. So so for individual alternatives, so you need to provide the cost, you need to provide the estimated cost as well as benefits. Essentially covers other steps of methodology also in the capsule form. That means when you are going through this cost calculation and benefit calculation, so usually you need to take into consideration the development methodology also, where we going through design, analysis, design, and then implementation, and then so whatever the steps part of that methodology should also be taken into consideration. Make a formal report and present it to management and users. So usually, so after going through the study, after going through the alternatives and after going through cost benefits, okay, so you make a report of you make a formal report of those things, and then you give it to the management and users, and they need to get reviewed. Okay, and after reviewing that report, so they should be stating they should be stating that whether these reviews are okay to them or not. So in terms of some questions that you can see, will alternatives be acceptable, whether that alternative is acceptable for them or not, whether what we are going to solve that problem is a right problem or not. So and then does any solution promise a significant return, whether the whatever the investment, because management is ultimately they are going to invest money on that particular project, right? Whether they are going to get some return, significant return on that investment. That means today, why this management is interested to invest large amount of money on this particular project. If it has no benefit, then they definitely will not go ahead with the project, right? So they will see in terms of return also, right? If they are getting some return, so then only it is a beneficial for them, right? So users and management select an alternative. So these alternatives may be selected, may be selected in consultation with the user as well as management. Okay. So many projects die here. Alternatives are not acceptable or too high cost. So when you going through these alternatives, so sometimes, so yeah, it has been observed that so many of these projects have not been taken up. The reason here is maybe they are too, they are too high cost. Okay. Now there are some three types of feasibility. Okay, so one is the economical. So where we try to see whether the returns justify the investment. That means whether we are getting a benefit, in terms of economy. Okay, whether we are getting some profits out of the investment. So that is what we try to see in part of economical feasibility. In part of technical feasibility, so whether that the technology available here, the technologies whatever available can be used to implement the alternatives or not, whether there is any technology available to implement or not. So if there is no technology available, then so at this point of time you can say that so the alternative may not be able to accept, alternatives may not be acceptable. Okay, so and the other one is operational. Okay, whether operationally it is feasible, the solution is feasible or not. I mean, in terms of rules, regulation, laws, organization culture, union agreements, etc. Let's say you have developed a software, and that software may be operated, but because of certain rules, that software may not be operated. Okay, may not be allowed to operate. So may not be able to keep that particular software in operation. Okay, so like for example, let's say let's say we are going to develop a software. Okay, for a particular sensor node. Okay, let's say there is a sensor device. Okay, so that sensor will contain some transmitter, receiver, this sort of components, right? Now we have developed a software. Okay, maybe the software in terms of medium access, okay, control. There is a medium access control protocol. Okay, it's we can say that's as of now we can say it's a software for that sensor. Now through that medium access control protocol, you should be able to access the medium or the channel or the frequencies. Okay, now let's say there are some government regulations on those regulations on use of those frequencies. Okay, so ISM band is probably used for industrial purpose or academic purposes, right? But it is not a licensed one. But there are some frequencies they are licensed ones. So you cannot, unless or until you take proper permission, so you will not be able to operate that particular solution. So that is what we are saying. So there may be that sort of, okay, or we have some sort of loss within our organization. Okay, so you need to ensure that whether this is operationally feasible. So costs, there are various type of cost involved here. Okay, so there is a one-time cost. So usually that includes equipment, training, and software development, consultation, site preparation, like where we are going to develop. I mean the space. Okay, so these are especially some sort of one-time cost. And there is a recurring cost. Usually it's a salary, so given to the employees who are part of this software development. And because of the maintenance, so there is a recurring cost always, because and there is a rentals, and there is a depreciation also, like over the time. So because this many things gets depreciated. Okay, so there is a cost involved, right? And there is a fixed and variable cost vary with volume of work. So there are some costs which can be fixed, and some costs can be variable, and this can be vary, that these variable costs can vary just because of the volume of workload. So if the workload is increasing, so usually the cost will increase, right? So these sort of costs can be part of. So, and then what is the benefits? How is the benefit? The benefits could be tangible. I mean, some benefits are quantifiable. I mean, they are tangible, and some are intangible. That means which cannot be measured. Some benefits which cannot be measured. We will see about this. So there is an example of a tangible benefits. Okay, saving in salaries. Okay, so let's say for example, in the manual existing system, let's say you employed 10 people to carry out those activities. Now you have developed a software for that process, okay, problem. Now there you need only one person to work on. Okay, so in the existing system there were 5 people. Now in the current system you need only one person. Okay, so when you want one person here, so that means the salary you are giving to this one person so is less as compared to the salaries paid to 5 different people. I mean, this way you can think of. So this is a very tangible one. We can see that benefit and saving in terms of inventory costs. Maybe if you're talking about any inventory management, so where you try to see inventory costs also, and maybe if it is a software applied for some industry, so you can see the production has been increased. Okay, the number of production of some units may be increased. Okay, or the production of our process, productivity of our existing system has been increased if you are going through this particular software. Okay, reduction in operational costs. So whatever the costs that were involved due to operational due to operating the particular system, so that cost has also been reduced. Then only you can say these are some benefits, right? So intangible benefits may include customer service, I mean resource utilization, and you can see you can have a better control over these activities. Okay, if you can do all these things, maybe the number of errors has been reduced. Okay, so these sort of things can be called as some sort of intangible benefits. Okay, so ability to handle more workload, so that has been increased, but previously it was not. So it's a intangible benefit. So now how you can estimate so early in the project, how you can estimate the cost of the software development so early in the project? So usually the best way is that, so whatever the system that you have, you decompose that particular system into subsystems, and then you estimate cost for each and every subsystem or the components. Okay, so that is the way that you fairly accurately estimate the cost for the whole system. Okay, so when you are estimating this cost of the software system, so usually we do not take into account the computer cost. That means there is a personal computer involved, right? So that cost will not be taken into account. Or let's say you using internet, or you using local area network, maybe you need some switches, routers to form a particular network, right? So if that sort of cost is there required, so those things will not be counted. Only it is counted towards the software development. Okay, so use historical data whenever available. Okay, so in order to estimate this cost, so if at all any historical data available, so based upon that historical data, that means you have developed similar sort of projects in the past, so then you have some data, so based upon those data also you can estimate. Okay, so now use organization standards for computing overhead. Sometimes when you are estimating this cost of the software development, usually you need to take into account the organization standards for computing overhead. Okay, so usually let's say for example I need to solve a project, I need to develop a project here in NIT. So there are some sort of overhead I need to pay. Let's say I got a project of 20 lakhs. So 10% or 20%. So straight away I need to give it to the institute. Why I need to give it? So this is the overhead, because I'm going to handle the project here. So that means, so some of these people are involved also, right? Maybe some of the things means like I need to pay the salaries to the people, right? So there is a strict office, right? So they are actually going to handle this issue. That is means they are also involved. That is the reason why they say that. So 20% overhead costs should be given to us because we are helping you in this particular project. So this sort of thing. So if at all it is there, if you are going to develop this software, in a particular organization, so they may have some sort of overhead, so they might be computing that, so that you need to take into account also. And there are costs because of managerial or secretarial support. Maybe, so in order to manage all these documents and all, so maybe there is a secretarial support is required. So what is the, paying the salary to a particular secretary of a manager, okay, or for a space, for utilizing a particular space. So maybe you need electricity because you might be running AC within that particular space, or maybe you have a fan, you might have a computer, so many things, right? So you need to take into those accounts as well. So personal, so you need to take some personal costs also, maybe that is the function of time. Let's say if a person is being deployed for, the person is being employed to work towards that particular project for 2 months, okay, so then the longer the person is employed for that particular project, so you may be paying more money, so towards development operation. So this is also, this cost should also be considered, okay. Now there is a financial analysis. So because you see, today you investing a money on a particular project, but maybe today you are not going to see the benefits. Maybe the benefits will be seen in future, okay. So now there is in financial field, so there are some sort of equations. So you should always be able to absolutely calculate the present value, okay. So you have what is the present value for your investment, okay. So whatever the investment that you are going to get, so this is based upon some sort of equation like P is equal to F by 1 plus L to the power of N, where P is the present value and F be the future value or the future benefit, and L is the prevailing interest rate. That means what is the interest rate that you are going to get, and in how many years you are going to, so that benefit will be seen after how many years, okay. So that can be represented through N, okay. So you have a amount, so you invested in a bank, let's say you invested in an amount and that gets some sort of interest, and that maybe you invested that money for 3 years or 4 years. So you wanted to see what is the present value if you invest some money, so what would be the present value after 3 years, okay. So you should be able to calculate. That means if it doesn't give any benefits, so then that would be beneficial for us, okay. So, and also you need to take into account the life of system, right? So now whatever the system that is developed, okay, so maybe after 5 to 7 years, the system may be obsolete, okay. And because of the technology advancements, because the technology has been changed or something, because of that the system today we have developed, and after 5 to 7 years, so that means there is a depreciation, okay. So every year there is some sort of depreciation, okay. So that also you need to take into account. Let's say today you have bought a software, and or you can think of like this: today you bought a vehicle, okay, car. After 5 years, when you sell that particular vehicle, so what will you be able to sell at the price what you bought? No, you will not be able to sell that with that price. Definitely the price will be reduced. So this is also you need to take into account when you are analyzing the financial things. So cost is investment in the project, benefits present in the return, okay. So usually always you get the benefits in terms of return, okay. So compute payback period in which you recover initial investment through accumulated benefits, because you invested money, right? So you need to calculate the payback period. Let's say in how many years you will be able to get back whatever the investment that you have done, okay. Payback period is expected to be less than the system life. That is true, okay. So let's say you have developed a software, okay. If the software's life cycle is 10 years, okay, and you invested some money to develop that particular software. So in less than 10 years, maybe 5 years or 7 years, so between 5 to 7 years, if you can get back whatever the money that you invested, that means the rest of the period, whatever you are getting, that will be considered as a benefit. Okay, so this is what exactly a payback period. Okay, so now feasibility study report always should have an introduction. So introduction section where we talk about the brief statement of the problem. Okay, and in which environment the system is to be implemented. Okay, I mean, like you can see, you can think of, let's say, for example, the problem that will be implemented in what sort of environment. Okay, so and what are different constraints that affect the project, like maybe in terms of cost, effort, or the available resources. Let's say you can think of like this. Okay, so you going to develop a software, and that software must be run over Windows operating system, not on Linux. Okay, or you can think of it should run over it should run on Linux operating system, not on the Windows operating system. The reason is that so Windows is a commercial one, so that requires some extra cost. Okay, so if you go through a Linux, so it's a open source. So this sort of constraint that you can always have. Okay, so if at all those things are there, so that should be mentioned. Okay, so you need to have a brief statement, and according to these constraints and the environment and the problem statement, so you need to get recommendations or the summary from the management, because management is the one who is going to invest money in this particular project. So you need to take their recommendations also. So that is to be mentioned out here in this management summary and recommendations. Okay, and then alternatives. So these alternatives, maybe we have taken all those alternatives. So right, so you need to mention what are the different alternatives are there along with their specifications, and then you need to tell what are the criteria that were used in selecting a particular approach. Okay, you have 4 alternatives, so out of which you have chosen one alternative. So what are the criteria being used to select that particular alternative? So that is also need to be mentioned out here. And system description. So an abbreviated version of information contained in the system specification. Okay, so those things should be mentioned out here, and if at all any references required, so you refer to the specifications of this system. So you need to mention the cost benefit analysis, evaluation of technical risk, if at all any risk involved in the technical part also. So how you going to evaluate them, so that must be also part of feasibility study. And if at all any legal ramifications, like as I said you before also, so you need to, once the estimations are very carried out, so that needs to be accepted by the user as well as management, then only we can go ahead with the project. If they are not going to accept, so this is a one legal issue. So if they have not accepted, and if you started developing a later point of the time, they say that, so they can always say that we are not going to accept your this project because the cost has been increased. Okay, so then it's a problem. So the software will be failed, right? So you need to ensure that also, right? Now the next phase we are going to talk here is the requirement analysis. So after feasibility, there is a requirement analysis. So main objective of this requirement analysis is to determine what the system must do to solve the problem. I mean, here we will not talk about how going to solve that problem. During part of requirement analysis, what the system must do to solve the system. Okay, and what is expected from the system, not how those things will be solved. Okay, usually this requirement analysis is usually done by an analyst. Okay, so sometimes we call requirement analyst also. Okay, so produce software requirement specification. After this requirement analysis, so it exactly produce the SRS. Okay, We will discuss about SRS completely in a separate lecture. Okay, and so the requirements, whatever the mentioned out in the SRS, that should be very incorrect. I mean, that should be correct. Okay, that means the requirement mentioned are very correct. Okay, and they should be complete. That means some of these requirements should not be missed out. Okay, and inconsistent. That means at one point of time saying something and later point of time they are saying the same requirement, but maybe no, they are saying differently at some different point of time, and it should be unambiguous. That means it should not, the requirement is whatever you defined. Okay, so that should not leave multiple interpretations. Okay, so that means it should not give different meanings. Okay, to the same sort of requirement. So that should not be there in a part of SRS. Okay, if that is there, then the project will be failed. Okay. So that is the reason why it is very requirement analysis very challenging. Why? So users may not know exactly what is needed. Sometimes the users are not clear of what they are actually expecting from the system. How computers can bring further value to what is being done today. So they do not know whether this software will help and increase their productivity in what way. So that is also not known. Users change their mind over time because the requirements are changing over time and they also change. Okay, they may have conflicting demands. Okay, so certainly they do have some sort of conflicting demands. Okay, and they cannot differentiate between what is possible and cost effective against that impractical. So they do not know whether something is practically possible or not. So they might have a wish list. That means they always think that this can be also done. Okay, by the system, but sometimes due to technology or that may not be possible. Okay, so these sort of things may not be differentiated. Analyst has no or limited domain knowledge. Usually analyst is the one who might not have domain knowledge, because let's say if the person the analyst is going, I mean the developer is going to develop a software for banking, but banking knowledge is not available with the analyst. So that sort of thing. So sometimes because they do not know, that is the reason why you need to analyze the requirement first very clearly. Okay, often client is different from the users. So sometimes you see users means who are going to use that particular software. Let's say a officer in a bank. So he is he or she is the user, okay, of that particular system. But the bank is the client, okay, for the company. Okay, do you understand? So now this sort of thing, right? So usually the client is different from the users. So that is the reason why you need to understand properly what is users requirement, not only the client's requirement. Okay, so SRS software requirement specification is basis for subsequent design and implementation. Once these requirements are specified properly, then only we can go ahead to the next phases like design and implementation. First and most important, baseline defines the contract with the users. Like so whatever you mention out in this SRS document, that will be a baseline for the contract. Okay, because today we agreed to meet all these requirements, and those are mentioned in the SRS. Okay, and later on you cannot claim that some other requirements have not met, which are not mentioned out in the SRS document by the user. Okay, so basis for validation and acceptance. So it is also valid. So because at the end of after the software has been successfully developed, right, there is a testing phase where we try to validate. Okay, so during that testing phase we try to validate whether the requirements of the user has been met or not. Okay, whether these requirements are I mean, these requirements are acceptable to the user or not. Okay, so these sort of things will be checked, and those things are exactly mentioned in the SRS, and through this document only you will be able to achieve this activity. Okay, so now cost increases rapidly after this step. Okay, I mean, defects not captured here become 2 to 25 times more costly to remove later. Like that means if at all you have not identified any defects, okay, I mean, defects means you have not addressed the requirements properly, and later point of time you wanted to incorporate those requirements. So definitely the cost will increase. That is what we are saying. So if at all any ambiguity is left there in the requirement itself, then that should be identified here itself. Otherwise, it will lead to increase of development cost. It defines all functional input, output, processing, and performance requirements. So this SRS document should talk about what is the input given to the system, what would be the outputs coming out from, and what are the processing required. Okay, data processing required, and whether if at all it has any performance requirements. So those things should be mentioned out along with the constraints. If at all any legal ramifications or social or operational guidelines, rules, if at all exist. So it should be mentioned out. Should be adequately detailed so that users can visualize what they will get. So after requirement analysis, the document, whatever it will be coming out is a SRS, and it is given to the user, and so that the user, after going through this, so user can usually visualize what they actually will get from the system. Okay, that means what are the requirements, actually what they have in their mind, and what is actually they going to get from the system. So that will be cleared out here. Design and implementation can be carried out once this SRS is prepared in a detailed way. So it will help the designer as well as coder to carry out their activities. Covers what a business level, everything should be mentioned out. What calculations really involved in the take home pay. I mean, what is the procedure, whether any allowances, deductions, taxes to be given, applied to all this take home pay. So these all things should be discussed as an example. So analysis process is actually, it is carried out. So usually it involves interviewing clients and users. So essentially to understand their needs from the system. So always, analysts go and meet with the client as well as the user. So carry out some interviews through which they try to understand the requirements or the needs. Often existing documents and current mode of operation can be studied. They may have document explaining procedures. Okay, if at all any existing documents or the current mode of operation, I mean, if there is a manual mode is going on, right? So the analyst will go and see through a directed investigation. That means they're going through check out certain existing documents. Okay, and then so it is a very long process, because because of that, so we need to carry out, these are all different activities in a very systematically manner, like interviewing, correlating, identifying gaps, so iterating again for more details. Maybe you can interview again and again. So try to find the gaps. Okay, focus on what gets done and needs to be done. So you always try to see what is exactly needed at this point of time. So that is what the focus should be there on. So focus on business entities, their interactions, business events. So what are different business entities involved in that particular project. Okay, and what are sort of interactions involved in those different business entities, and what sort of business events happening. So those things should be the focus of an analyst. Identify users and important business activity. That is what I said, who is going to use that particular software solution. Okay, and what are the business entities? I mean, what are the different entities that part of that particular business? Okay, so let's say, for example, in our academics, let's say you can see there are different sections we have. There is a SRIC section, and there is a account section, and there is a academic section. So these are the various business entities. Okay, and part of those business entities are different users, right? So for academics, so students and dean academic, okay, or assistant registrar. So they are the users for that particular system, okay. And in part of accounts section, maybe accountants are the only users, okay. You need to identify users as well as business entities and functional domain knowledge, okay. So you need to try to get all domain knowledge about those entities. So usually, so it all, so maybe interview users to get details through questionnaire. So maybe these details can be obtained through users by using some questionnaire. So you prepare a set of questions and those questions will be given to the user, and thereafter you try to study them. So, and the second process you can see here, examine existing system. Like, so if at all any existing forms are available, outputs are there, records are there. Now you see the existing system so as to understand. And then usually when we are going through this analysis process, we often go from outside to inside. Okay, that means going outside to inside means we going from the boundary of the system. Boundary of the system means what? What is the input? Okay, first boundary means first what is the input and what is the output. Okay, so they may be at the very front line. Okay, let's say you developing ATM software. So what is first what you do? You input the credit card or debit card. Okay, so and then you input the pin code. So these are the first steps that you do. Okay, so and then what is the output exactly coming when you give all these inputs? So what is the output you are going to see? Okay, so first output and input, and then what processing are involved, right, inside, and what records are kept. That means what records need to be stored in the form of some database, and how you going to update those records. Okay, so slowly from outside to inside of the system you are moving, okay, when you are going through any sort of analysis. Okay, so now and then identify users and their roles and plan of interviews. So because you need to systematically identify the users and their roles, as well as accordingly you plan different interviews. So interviewing the clients or the users is a very art. So you need a you need to, whatever the information that you get from them, okay, so you try to record those informations details. Sometimes you need very prompt users in visualizing the requirements, because ultimately the analysis phase, so you try to establish the requirements. So that is the reason why you need very prompt users. Sometimes you require good communication skills and domain skills, and you need to have a patience also, because you need to understand the user, right? You should be perseverance in collecting. And then so whatever the information that is being collected, so that is a very huge, okay, amount of information. So those information need to be organized, recorded, classified, and sometimes you need to be conceptualized. Okay, so maybe you keep them the data in the form of some tree hierarchy or something like that, so as to understand the data. Okay, and you need to discuss and because how you gonna store these data, and what is the input, what is the output files, what is the computations really required, how you going to use them. So because this all help you in finding out the consistency and completeness of the work done so far. So sometimes you may be going through some sort of models or projections from different perspectives, because that will help you out in understanding the problem. Okay, because you see how you gonna handle this complexity. Maybe you are going through some sort of divide and conquer mechanism. Okay, I mean if at all any unnecessary details are there, you need to hide them, because that will create a confusion many times. So whatever required information that need to be put on, and whatever is not really required, that can be hidden. Okay, that should be hid. Okay, so reduces errors, ensures consistency and completeness. So maybe we're going through some sort of data flow diagrams. Okay, so usually, or you may be going through some sort of entity relationship models, ER model, okay, or some sort of object models. They are commonly used in object-oriented software. Okay, so we'll talk about these data flow diagrams and all in the next slide. And the next phase here is system design, but we will not talk about this system design today. Okay, we'll talk about this in the next lecture. Okay. So any doubts so far, students? Students, can you hear me?
No, sir. Yes, sir.
Any doubt? Anyone has any doubt?
Sir, no, sir.
No, sir. No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay. So can I stop this lecture?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I stop this recording as well, and I am taking the attendance. Just wait for a minute. Okay.
Okay, sir.